In this lesson, we will learn about Azure availability zones. First, we will answer the question, what are Azure availability zones? Then we will learn about zone redundant deployments and zonal deployments. After that, we will go into the detail about physical and logical zone mapping. Finally, we will conclude our lesson with the review questions. Availability zones are separated groups of data centers within a region. Each availability zone has independent power, cooling, and networking infrastructure. Availability zones are connected through high-speed, private fiber optic networks. An availability zone is set up to be an isolation boundary. If a zone goes down, the others continue working. Availability zones are usually within 100 kilometers to make sure they're close enough to have low latency connections to other availability zones, but they are also far enough apart to reduce being affected by local outages or weather. To ensure resiliency, a minimum of three separate availability zones are present in all availability zone enable regions. Please note that not all Azure regions currently support availability zones. Let's learn about zone redundant deployments. In Azure, some types of resources are zone redundant. Zone redundant resources are replicated or distributed across multiple zones to make sure if a zone in the region is down, it doesn't affect the availability of the data. With zone redundant deployments, Microsoft manages spreading requests and replication of data across zones. If an outage occurs in an availability zone, Microsoft manages failover to another zone automatically. For example, when you create a new storage account in this Azure region, Microsoft automatically put it into zone 3 like this, and Microsoft will replicate its data to zone 1 and then to zone 2. Also, Microsoft is responsible for sending all the requests to the storage account in Zone 3. And if the storage account in Zone 3 is down for any reason, Microsoft also fail over and send all the requests to the storage account in Zone 2. In contrast to zone redundant deployments and zonal deployments, in zonal deployments, zonal resources such as virtual machines, managed disks, and standard IP addresses can be deployed to a specific zone. To improve the resiliency, you can create multiple instances of a zonal resource in different availability zones. Then the resource is resilient to the outage of a single availability zone. If a zonal resource is not configured to deploy to a specific zone, it will be placed in any zone in the regions. If the zone experiences an outage, the resource may not be available. To understand zonal deployment, let's analyze this example. Assuming you have an application with three tiers, frontier, middle tier, and database tier installed on three VMs. The three VMs should be deployed in the same zone, for example, zone 3, like this, to ensure high performance. You should not deploy the VM of each tier in different zones as it will reduce the performance of the application. And if a VM in a tier is down, then the application is malfunction anyway. To increase the resiliency, another set of the three VMs can be deployed into another zone, for example, zone 2 like this. However, to get this setup to work, the databases of the two sets must be synchronized like this. In a normal operation, all the requests are sent to the main application in zone 3. Now, when zone 3 is down for any reasons, you will have to route the traffic to the application hosted in zone 2. As you may know, each Azure data center is assigned to a physical zone. When an Azure subscription is created, it creates its own logical zones which map to the physical zones based on its selection. Therefore, the zone mapping for one subscription could be different for other subscriptions. For example, in this Azure regions, it has three physical zones: Zone 1, Zone 2, and Zone 3. For your project, you need to create an Azure subscription in these regions. For example, subscription A. It creates three logical zones from 1 to 3, which map to the physical zones in these orders. Now, for a new project, which requires you to create a new subscription in this same Azure region, for example, subscription B, it also creates three logical zones: Zone 1, Zone 2, and Zone 3. However, these logical zones in subscription B are mapped to the physical zones in these orders, which means when you create a new VM in Zone 1, subscription A, it will be created in the physical Zone 1. However, when you create a new VM in Zone 1, subscription B, it will be created in the physical Zone 2. To compare zone mapping for resilient solutions that span multiple subscriptions, you must use the dedicated ARM API check zone peers. Let's conclude our lesson with the review questions.